Hello.
Hi there.
Hi
there.
I'm Marian Pallister, for the benefit of those that are watching. And I'm the chair of Pax Christi Scotland. And as you probably know, one of our aims is to reach out to people on the margins. And few people are more marginalised in 2023 than those suffering from mental health problems and those who care for them. It's been a tough winter for everyone, and the industrial action that we've experienced, it testifies to the fact that too many people in frontline care are underpaid and overworked. And I'm sure that the pair of you would agree with that. Perhaps some of the worst paid workers are those caring for people at their most vulnerable. And if you've wondered why there's a shortage of care workers in the mental health sector, well, you'd be better delivering pizzas. Despite having good qualifications, these are workers on the Scottish living wage, which is soon to go up to the magnificent sum of £10.90 an hour. There are, I think, and you'll tell me this in a minute, I think over 200,000 people working in this sector in Scotland. And as you see, I've got people with me today. I've got Stephen McLellan, Chief Executive of Recovery Across Mental Health, and Irene Brown, who's a care worker. You'll correct me if that's wrong. And we're going to hear from them because Pax Christi Scotland wants to help seek access to the human rights that we're all entitled to, and to work for peace of mind for both carers and those cared for. Raising awareness is the starting point. So, Stephen, can you tell us a little bit about your organisation and about the wider picture for care workers in Scotland?
Okay, thanks so much, Marian. As an organisation, we employ about 180 people. So we work, our staff team is 180, and we have maybe 50 or 70 volunteers to support that. On any given day, we will support about 1,500 individuals across Renfrewshire, East Renfrewshire, North Ayrshire, and a wee bit into Argyll and Bute. So the kind of west of Scotland in general. And that works out 1,500 people a day, or about 5,500 over the course of a year. So it's not insignificant. And I know that we provide these services, which are social care, and fundamentally 24 hours a day in some instances, every day of the year, up to and including 24 hours a day for some people. And you mentioned earlier about social care being undervalued. I would say it's a great job. You know, social care is a great job. I've been in this job now for 30 odd years, and prior to that I was a nurse, a psychiatric nurse, and I chose to continue working with vulnerable people out with the health service, but in the social care setting. And it's been great for me, and it's been a great opportunity for lots and lots of other people. The challenge we have, as you've kind of alluded to, is the fact that it's undervalued and unrecognised as a career and as a status, as a kind of professional status organisation, or a professional status field. You mentioned 200,000. There's about, I think the stats say 209,000 people work in social care in Scotland. Now, social care is really people who need additional support to maintain their lives and live a comfortable life in the community, out with kind of hospital settings, for example. So it's a range of social, physical, emotional support. And there's a huge variety of what that could constitute. For some people, it's counselling. For other people, it's support to get employment. For other people, it's just maintaining a tenancy, or a whole host of associated elements. So it's not one size fits all. And that 209,000 people represents a huge swathe of the working population in Scotland. I think it's about 9% of the working population in Scotland is employed in some shape or other in social care. So it's an absolutely fundamental element of how a society exists and how a society should exist. Health and social care, it's not just the absence of illness, it's the promotion of well-being and being socially adept and comfortable and competent to live your life. So I'll leave it. I'll pass to Irene if you've got anything you want to add.
I was just going to say, Irene, why is it so undervalued when it's so important? I mean, we talk about peace of mind as part of our peace mission, as it were, and for society itself, surely being able to create that peace of mind is so important. So why do you think it's so undervalued?
I think we're very valued by the people we provide the service to, and the staff feel very valued by our senior management team as well. So just to kind of clarify that first of all, I think the undervalued bit comes from the powers that be that can do something to improve the conditions that we actually work in. We don't feel our voice is heard at all. A lot of people don't know that we exist. They hear about social care and they think it's the nursing homes who do a fabulous job, but they don't realise there's so much else goes on as well. And as I say, if you're trying to promote what we do, or try to get better conditions for us, people don't seem to be listening to us, or we all feel we don't have a voice. And this is becoming, we're hearing this more and more from the staff in the organisation, that they're not feeling valued outside it.
So, Stephen, you've told me in the past that no one's advocating for social care in this sense. Can you expand on that, please? Why aren't they listening?
Well, there you go. Consecutive governments over a long period of time have I guess, and I'm going to say, trivialised or ignored or marginalised the value of the social care workforce and the competency of the workforce, the professionalism of the workforce. And it's an absolute mystery to me as to why consecutive governments of any political persuasion do not seem to have grasped the value of what's going on around about them. We've been having recent meetings with numerous politicians, and without naming names, one of them said, "What do you expect me to do about it? I'm only a backbencher." And that's not why, I don't think that's why any of us elect members of any parliament, is to be only a backbencher, to sit and be placid and insignificant in the process of representation. And I think that's it. I can't give you an answer. I do not know an answer as to why people would feel that it's all right to marginalise and exclude such a huge volume of people. Never mind the value of the work they do. As 8% of the population, that's a huge constituency of people who are voters. They're all over 18. They all vote, and people will choose how to vote, I guess, without being parliamentary, without being party political about it. It's a choice. And as I say, consecutive governments at all levels do not seem to have acknowledged the value. We have no beef with other colleagues and other occupations being recognised and validated. That's good on them. Absolutely no problem with that whatsoever. I just cannot for the life of me get my head around why there is no validation of social care. And I'm going to say there is no validation. I'm not really interested in the mealy-mouthed words that come out of some politicians about during COVID how wonderful the work was, how committed people were. And yet once that immediacy of COVID is passed, we're back to square one again. We didn't get PPE regularly when the COVID was in place. It took some time for it to come through. There were expectations that work would go on, and people were committed to doing it. No staff were furloughed. We didn't furlough staff. So throughout the whole COVID process, our staff, they might have worked differently, but they still worked.
Right.
So we then had that process, and we all have families, we all have the dependents, and people did that. People worked, and they worked without any rancor. Nobody said, no, that's not for me. I'm not doing that. You're putting me in jeopardy. I had no experience of that whatsoever from a workforce of 180, and I'm not familiar with any colleagues who had that kind of response either. People just went and did it. And
So
that I think, sorry, there you go.
No, I was just going to say, Irene, what was that like working under those kind of conditions?
It was difficult. I'm a manager in the service, so I wasn't out front facing myself, but there were people out waiting in queues outside the chemist for a couple of hours trying to get people prescriptions, on the phones trying to reassure people. But we had the housing staff who, again, this disease, no one knew what, you know, how dangerous it was. Everyone's very frightened of it. And as Stephen said, not one of them, they all did what they had to do. They supported the people that needed the support. I don't know what would have happened if they hadn't done that. You know, there was where you're getting your food from. So all these things that people hadn't kind of thought of out of the blue. And as Stephen said, no one was furloughed. We were all working, and if we couldn't get to someone, we'd be phoning people. We were actually supporting the NHS staff who are worried about going home to their families, taking their clothes in that might have COVID on it, supporting families whose family members were dying from the disease and they couldn't be with them. You know, we're really close to it, and we did feel, I think we get our hopes built up a bit, thinking, well, this is great, we're getting validated, we're getting recognised for what we do, and talk about crestfallen now, that it's just gone back to, and as Stephen said, I firmly believe everyone out there that can do something knows about what's going on, and they're choosing not to do it. There was, I think, something in the BBC a few weeks ago, a reporter was saying there's 7 prime ministers, British prime ministers have all been told you have to attend to social care, and not one of them's touched it. So how did that make you feel? Not good, that's for sure.
And how does that impact on, right, we can kind of imagine that your work is 24/7, I think, but as a result of this lack of investment, what's actually happening to carers and patients alike, both materially and emotionally? What's that doing to you, Irene? And perhaps you could come in on that as well, Stephen. Irene first.
It's a big question. I think, I don't know who to start with that one, to be honest with you. There's people aren't coming in for, you know, when I used to advertise for jobs, I would get for a community select worker. So I'm the manager of a service where we've got people based in the GP practices. When we used to advertise for jobs, I would get 25 to 30 applications. I think the last time I got 2, because we can't compete with all the other salaries out there. People that work for the organisation tend to want to stay with it because it has really good values and ethics. If anyone leaves, it's usually purely down to they've got more money elsewhere. So it's really hard retaining staff and keeping them motivated when there's, you know, they can't, you know, I used to work in a bank, and I would used to every year we get our annual increment, you get your pay rise every year without fail. You know, I was used to that, so I can see the contrast when in here, and the board and Stephen and the senior management are doing their best to try and get you any kind of, usually it's a one-off payment we tend to get because they can't commit to giving people, and particularly the cost of living now, you know, but we're all struggling with the cost of living, particularly in this sector where a lot of people are so poorly paid.
Yes, and that that just emphasizes the fact that you feel undervalued, doesn't it? When
Absolutely.
Money doesn't go far enough to buy the basics and pay for your electricity. Excuse me 1 second, everybody who's listening, and you too. I have an attention-seeking cat, as you probably have noticed, and I'm just going to make sure.
It's always the cats.
It's always the cats. At least never walked across the screen.
I know.
Well, that makes it casual enough, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Yes.
I'm sorry, and we were talking about a very, very serious point, because people do feel, I mean, I know that people who are working, who are going to food banks and so on, and that does make them, it diminishes them, doesn't it? And that's partially, that's the material side of it, but the emotional side must be, you know, you must end up being the ones that need the care as opposed to being the caregivers. Stephen?
Well, I think you're told not to absorb other people's issues. You're trained to try and dissociate yourself from it or distance yourself from it. But it's very difficult when you've been working with somebody for several hours a day, perhaps, who is in a really traumatic place and their life might be chaotic and there's a lot of vulnerability and risk. And you can't just switch off when you walk out the door and just, oh, that's it, oh, another day, another dollar, on we go. So you carry that other person's sort of anxieties and fears and stresses with you, as well as whatever's going on in your own life. And nobody's immune. None of us get a free pass in this. We all have challenges, families, kids, relationships, money. So you accumulate your own issues plus other people's issues. So part of the job is for us is to try to dispel that to some extent or manage it to some extent. But there's no magic wand. There's no magic wand in mental health per se. There's certainly no magic wand where you can resolve people of their personal issues just because they're staff. You don't get a free pass. So we have these challenges as well. And I think the thing that galls me, and I can only speak as an individual, and I'll give it away. I've been doing it now 47 years. So I've been in the field 47 years. So I speak with a degree of at least experience, if not competency. And that I've become aware of myself and others, I think, over the piece, becoming increasingly more fraught and frustrated at the impact. And it impacts on my colleagues or my friends, but I can see that the potential impact that's going to have on people we support. Now, if we're supporting 1,500 people a day, then those 1,500 people deserve staff who are doing the job to feel respected, to feel valued, because they'll do a better job. It's inevitable. Nobody sets out to do a bad job. But if you're operating under all these extraneous pressures that you can't really control, then it's bound to impact on how you do your job. So society benefits from a social care workforce that is competent, valued, and validated. The contrary is correct. If you don't have that validation, you don't feel well regarded in your job, then you're probably not going to want to do the job. It's an inevitability of any job, I guess. But I would argue that some of the tasks that the staff that Irene and others carry out are hugely demanding. In terms of what they do with the people they're working with, it can carry risk. Individuals carry risk to themselves more often than not, and it's our job to try and manage that. But if you're not feeling well respected, well regarded, validated, and let's face it, we're remunerated. Nobody comes into this field to be rich. You just don't. Health, social care, nobody's going to retire wealthy. So you know that. So you don't come into it for money. But you do have the demands and pressures and stresses of life. So you've got to be sort of competent and capable of doing that. And I come back to my basic point. Nobody is advocating for the social care workforce. Neither politicians nor anybody else in the position of power. We have, and I'm going to call it mealy-mouthed comments from transient politicians who come and go, but nobody has grasped this and nobody has taken it on as a model issue. And it is a model issue. It has to be a model issue, regardless of just, we're not in here arguing for the free holidays in the Bahamas. It's the basics. And if we're talking about the living wage, 63% of the staff who work for us are on the living wage. So 111 people roughly are on the living wage. And they'll get 40 pence an hour increase on the 1st of April. And that's it. So the other 60, 70 people in the organisation get nothing. Nothing. So it's not as if it's graduated or spread. And great if you're on the bottom. But I have to say that you're asking some of the pressures and stresses on the sector. We are losing people to jobs in shops, in fast food restaurants, in delivery agencies, because they get paid more with substantially less responsibility.
Yes.
And that's a challenge. That again reflects back on the competency of the workforce, on the availability of a workforce to support people who need support. So it's not just about giving people more money because they deserve it. It's the consequences. If you do not do that, then you will not have a workforce, and the tens of hundreds of thousands of people who receive support from us and from the likes of us will no longer get that support to the level they need, which increases the risk to them as individuals.
Sorry, can I just ask Irene, the people that you manage, what kind of qualifications are you seeking when they send in the CVs? What are you looking for?
But the job, well, I manage a youth counselling service as well, so they would have to be, you know, a certified qualified counsellor. But in the community link post, we're, you know, minimum HNC. We have got people used to do social work, so there's lots of people with degrees. They don't need that for the job, but the HNC is the lowest, and then we do expect them to keep working on their professional development, you know, to keep continuing. So I mean, I'm doing a degree level just now. At my age, I went uni for the first time. You know, so I started here as a volunteer. I worked in a bank for a long time. Then I started here as a volunteer, and then I've worked in housing. I've done various different jobs, and now I manage 2 services. So it's a great sector to work for. It really is. You know, if you work hard, it really pays off. But I think anyone that funds the third sector would say they get really fantastic value for money. People do in the sector. It's like a vocation. You do give over and above. And I think that's what people are finding quite difficult to take as well. They know that's what we do, but still no one will speak up for us. Or
is there a perception that people who are doing these jobs are not as highly qualified as they clearly are?
I think there probably is. Particularly people in the living wage, my right saying, Stephen, you've got to be SPQ3.
SPQ level 2 and 3, so that's a reasonable minimum level qualification, and people then choose to progress up through the Scottish Vocational Qualification Network, for example, to degree level and above, you know, as a kind of in-house sort of training. But there is a minimum requirement. But no, I suspect that people just assume that, say, you pitch up, you're nice people, you do good things, and that's it. But there's huge monitoring, there's huge compliance issues, there's training, there's professional standards. So it is absolutely a professional field without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
And there are people who operate to the same level as professional staff in statutory organisations such as social work and nursing, for example.
And are you in a union, Irene? Are the people who work for you in a union?
To be honest, I think there's some people who would like to be in a union but can't afford it. I am in the union, but I found them not. I seem to get contacted about supporting other professions. I don't ever see. The only thing I've got for the third sector is to go along and get tips on how to ask your charity for a pay rise. So I've got that next week, I think. So that's going to be really interesting. And I think just to reiterate what Stephen said, I think it's by not valuing the workforce, you're not valuing the people that we support, and they deserve, you know, to have workers that are really able to support them the best they can, because it is the most vulnerable people that we do support, and the staff are spread so thin sometimes, you know, and then they still want to make cuts to that. I don't know what else they expect you to do.
When you ask about unions, I recently wrote to 4 major unions who represent health, social care. 1 responded, 3 didn't reply. So I'll just leave it.
That's very worrying, because you imagine that that's one of the avenues that you could take to make improvements in these situations. Do you know what really, when you said that your organisation is dealing with 1,500 people a day, 5,500 probably a year, that's your organisation. Right. So how many, what's the estimate of the people throughout Scotland who are needing this kind of help?
I would speculate probably about a fifth, 20%, a million people. I can't give you absolute numbers. I can check and see, but I would speculate that there's probably 1 million people in Scotland receive some form of social care support. Now, it might be transitory, they might not even know they're getting it sometimes.
Yeah.
But I would suspect it is very much, because you're talking at all levels and all stages in development. So it's from nursery school support right through to care home and elderly care and everywhere in between. So it is an absolutely astronomical number of people will be in receipt of some form of social support intervention.
So most of the people who are, or many of the people who might watch this and listen to what you're both saying will have experience either as carers or as those receiving care.
Yeah, I mean, carers is one, for example. I mean, how many people are carers who maybe have need to contact a local carers centre or a befriending scheme or some such thing from time to time? So that's just one. And as I say, there are multiple tiers and levels of intervention and support: youth counselling, adult counselling, employability support, physical activity, linked workers, housing support. There's a multitude of elements to this that constitute the totality of social care. So it's not one size fits all.
And is that one of the problems, perhaps, that because it's so diverse in what it does, this sort of amorphous mass of caring that's going on, badly paid, unrecognised, and you can't kind of, it's kind of like jelly. You kind of can't say, well, this is who should be getting the respect and the more money and the decent conditions. Is that
pretty much? Yeah, yes. No, I think you're absolutely right. And there are probably thousands of organisations doing it, from a kind of very small, locally based community centre type organisation up to big national organisations and anywhere in between. So that the sector is not a homogenous mass, as you say. It is very amorphous. And I think it's not like you can't point at it and say it's a local authority or it's a health board, which people can tend to, you can pretty much identify with that. You can't point to the social care sector, well, that's it in a nutshell. It is so spread, it's so spread over multiple organisations. And I guess going back to your previous point about unions, that's one of the problems. Not people might be members of unions, but not every organisation is unionised. So the unions probably don't see themselves having a foothold. But having said that, nor do they go out to seek a foothold, I would argue. So I think that we're not just blaming government. There are other entities in society who should have a role to play, and I mean, include unions in this, who are pretty obvious by their absence.
So is it that I'm just trying to think where we go from here, because it would be nice to be able to say, this is what you can do to help this situation, but it would be a massive job, it's sounding to me, to actually get all of these organizations and people who are in the sector to join together as an organization with an umbrella, to create an umbrella situation for them. Is that really beyond what's possible?
There are 2 or 3 organisations that are kind of, broadly speaking, representative. There's an organisation called Coalition of Care Providers in Scotland. Now, 90 organisations are part of that. So that's a chunk. There's Scottish Care, who represents some care home providers, but not all. So there's moves towards umbrella organisations. But to be honest, even those umbrella organisations would tell you, I think, that they're banging their heads off a wall as well, because they don't get access, or they don't get the hearing that they probably feel. But the only thing I can think would make a difference is, and this probably came from some MSPs we met recently, was the more people that pester their MSPs as individuals, the more it becomes a thing. You know, and until there's a kind of a watershed moment where it tips, up until that point, it's just the voices in the dark. And we feel like the voices in the dark just now. It's not until there's a movement, an individual movement, I guess, of people who choose to contact their elected members or their MSPs or whomsoever to raise the issue. You know, it would be wonderful if the 209,000 people who work in the sector could all write letters. That might have some effect. But it feels even quite naive speaking like this. You know, it sounds quite idealistic and naive. But I do think that the volume of people, the numbers of people getting in touch and making it an issue is the only thing that's going to encourage politicians to take notice.
Well, so if our Pax Christi members and friends were to write to their MSPs, part of the of Catholic social teaching is to ensure that there is a dignity for the individual and dignity in the workplace. And to me, all that you've been saying and is just exactly that dignity is lacking. Would you agree with that, Irene?
Yes.
That
Yes.
dignity
Yes.
in the workplace is lacking?
Yes, I think people are seeing that more and more now. People that were just, you know, never really said anything, were just happy to work away. You hear it now from people you'd never heard anything from before, because that's just how they're feeling, the unforgotten. And I think, as Stephen said, I think a lot of people, like community link workers in the GP practices, the people that use that service won't know that's social care. You know, because it comes under so many different wee umbrellas under the big umbrella. It's all very different.
So we have a job to do as Pax Christi Scotland then, would you say, Stephen, if we kind of sum up that way?
That would be really helpful. I think the more organisations that recognise and respect the kind of the attributes and the competencies and the contribution to society, that there is I suppose a moral argument to be had that to respect your fellow, your colleagues, workers, neighbours is something to be valued. And I think that the workforce, the wider workforce, just does not feel validated, does not feel respected, does not feel acknowledged in any shape or fashion. And that's it's galling for me to see that in colleagues, but it's dangerous for society if that then, if what we're looking for is to recruit people in, to bring in the next generation of people. But if there's kids or younger people out there just now watching this, or who says I want to grow up and work in social care? There's probably very few. So we have a challenge, if not immediately now, then we have a challenge in 2, 5, 10 years' time about creating a workforce if we cannot be seen to respect the people that are currently there.
Well, in May, Pax Christi Scotland is going to hold an online event to explore all of this situation in Scotland more deeply than we've had an opportunity to talk today. It's Mental Health Week in May, so we hope that you two will join us, and that those who are watching this will join us, and that together we can be a voice for professionals, for patients, for individuals whose human rights and peace of mind are challenged by this situation. So thank you so much, Stephen and Irene, for your time. Go in peace.
Thank you for your time,
Andrew, thanks very much for taking the time to speak to us. Take care.
Thank you very much.